Guys, I'm really picky and choosy what transfer portal news I highlight, right? Because just the sheer number of players that enter the transfer portal, you literally cannot keep up with them all. But there are some that are different than others. There are some players, as we all know, that are different than others when it comes to being difference makers, when it comes to being impact players. And that is the case with Caleb Downs, who we learned this morning, the Alabama freshman All-American safety, plans to enter the transfer portal. And the question now is, where will he end up? Is he a lock to go to Georgia? Is Ohio State in the mix? Could maybe Texas sneak in and land him? And guys, when you look at Caleb Downs, a former 5-star prospect, was number 1 across the board, was Mr. All Everything from the state of Georgia. He picked Alabama over Georgia, Ohio State, and Notre Dame out of high school. Those are his top schools that he chose Bama over. Like I mentioned, he was a freshman All-American this past season. Guys, the numbers for a true freshman. He led Alabama in tackles. First time a true freshman's done that, I think I read, since 1970. Like, it was an unprecedented season what Caleb Downs did. 107 tackles at the safety spot. Get this, 70 were solo. 70 solo tackles. 3.5 tackles for loss. He had a forced fumble. He had a fumble recovery, and he had 2 interceptions as well. This dude was a menace on the defensive side of the football. And again, guys, just a true freshman, only going to get better. Now, when it comes to this decision, I don't think it's really a surprise, right? We've heard since Nick Saban hung it up, and we've seen the portal just completely gut Alabama, which, on that note, side note, it's funny to see the reaction of Alabama fans now that Caleb Downs is in the portal, right? We're seeing on the timeline this morning a lot of chatter about NIL and transfer portal. And listen, I'm no adversary of Alabama. I'm no hater of Alabama. But what I would say to Alabama fans is this: welcome to what every other fan base in college football has been dealing with since transfer portal and NIL were rolled out, right? Bama fans have had for years, and don't blame them for it, but Alabama has had that trump card of, well, we have Nick Saban. We have Lord Saban to protect us from, the portal or NIL or the craziness of what's going on in the college football world, right? There was always that, we got Nick Saban. Well, now you don't. Now you don't. And Alabama fans are having to learn how to live in this new era of college football. And the floodgates have been open. I think it's like 20 guys have entered the portal. They've suffered like 6 decommitments. Another one, as we were just on break, into the transfer portal. Offensive tackle, Caden Proctor, 6'8", 365, started every game for Bama as a true freshman, was another freshman All-American and first-team freshman All-SEC player, was ranked the number 1 offensive tackle in the 2023 class. So Alabama's dealing with this transfer portal stuff, but nobody in college football feels bad for them, nor should they, because it's like, hey, this is what everyone else who did not have Nick Saban as their head coach had to deal with. Now, when you look at Caleb Downs specifically, right? I mean, a fantastic player, guys. I think you could argue right now one of, if not the best defensive backs in all of college football. This dude is already being projected as a high draft pick, and I believe the 2026 NFL draft, right? This is a legitimate dude, a game changer, a difference maker on the defensive side of the football. Most folks look at this and say, okay, he's going to Georgia. He's a Georgia lock. I think there's reason for that, right? Travaris Robinson, who was his main recruiter at Alabama, he has now left. He is going to Georgia. You would figure that's probably going to impact his decision. Now, we just heard from Chris Marler. He thinks he's going to land at Ohio State, or at least feels that's a strong possibility. Could Texas come into the fold as well? They've got more NIL funding than they know what to do with, right? And just landed Isaiah Bond. Does that help them, right? Does Isaiah Bond lure Caleb Downs to Austin? Or does he go to the Big Ten? Does he go to Ohio State? We just saw Quinshawn Judkins go there. Their NIL situation is really good. I still find it hard to believe Caleb Downs won't be a dog, folks. I still find that very, very hard to believe, right? With the way Kirby Smart is such a relentless recruiter and is consistently and constantly just recruiting and recruiting and recruiting. And I think, guys, what he does, I think he keeps recruiting guys like a Caleb Downs. I think he stays in contact with them just because he knows, hey, there's a chance something like this could happen. There's a chance a kid that we recruited, he could enter the portal, and we could be right there reaping the benefits. Our good friend JD Piquel, friend of the show, he just posted something that I think is so true. I mean, these words from JD are poetic. He posted this on X. Finishing second for a recruit at the high school level has never been more important. I mean, that is speaking the prophecy in college football right now. Really, truly. That is speaking the prophecy, right? The recruiting process, it's not even over when you think it's over, right? It's not over when a kid signs with the school. It's not over when he goes there. It's not even over when he plays for the school, guys. It never ends, which is why I think Nick Saban stepped away from college football because, to be fair, and I think it's honestly very fair that he doesn't want to deal with that. But Kirby Smart's a guy who loves it, who eats it up. So I tend to think he's going to land at Georgia. I mean, again, we just heard Chris Marler say he thinks Ohio State. Maybe Texas could come into the picture here with this. So going to be fascinating. Obviously, Caleb Downs, guys, I read this morning, he's going to attract like quarterback type money. He's that type of player as a safety, as a defensive back. Can you imagine the safety duo if he goes to Athens? Could you imagine that duo of Caleb Downs and Malachi Starks? The best safety tandem in college football, and it wouldn't even be close. And we talked all week, guys. We've talked the last 7 days or so. Who benefits the most from Nick Saban retiring? Which team and which program is the happiest? Which benefits the most? The answer's simple. It's Georgia. I mean, it is, guys. It's Georgia. It's easily Georgia because there's so many battles on field, off field. There's so many things. Like the last thing standing in Georgia's way, I think, from taking over college football was Nick Saban. That was the last thing. Nick Saban was the last thing standing in Georgia's way. The path has been cleared for the Dogs, right? And now they're starting to pick on Bama's roster, open season, especially if Caleb Downs ends up in Athens. Now, again, I mentioned this earlier, but I want to restate this because with this Caleb Downs stuff, right, we're seeing a lot of chatter on the timeline from Bama folks talking about the transfer portal and NIL. And I think all of us as fans of college football, fans of college sports, we can all agree that the portal is far from perfect, right? College football right now is far from perfect with what's going on with the transfer portal, NIL, what have you. There are adjustments that need to be made. But Alabama fans, you're going to have a hard time finding sympathy from anybody because what Alabama's going through right now with the roster and the portal and the tampering, fans of every other team practically have been dealing with this since the portal and NIL became a thing. Alabama has been shielded from this because they had Lord Nick Saban, right? And that really trumped everything else. They didn't have to worry about kids entering the portal left and right and coaches poaching their roster because they had Nick Saban, the greatest of all time. That is no longer the case. Welcome to the real world of being a college football fan. A reality that Alabama folks having a tough time getting accustomed to. Now, Will it course correct, right? I think Alabama's going to be just fine, right? They've still got one of the most talented rosters in college football. And again, like I mentioned earlier, guys, I'm not a hater of Bama in any type of way, but it's just the harsh reality that Alabama fans have got to realize. This is a new era. This is a new day. This is not the Nick Saban-led Alabama Crimson Tide anymore. There is as much uncertainty in the future for Alabama football as there has been in quite some time. And that's reflected by the latest. Caleb Downs. Is he a lock to be a dog? Will he end up at Ohio State, end up at Texas? We shall see.